again this week. It's Behaloscha in Chutz La'aretz. It's Shelach in Eretz Yisrael, and we will try to talk about both. But beginning with Parshas Behaloscha, you know that Behaloscha is really a turning point in Sefer Bamidbar, and not in a positive way. The parsha begins on an optimistic note, behemshich to the previous parshas. After we spent a year at Har Sinai, finally the Mishkan is put up, and the Hashros Hashchina that was in Sinai now moves to the Oil Moed, with which we will travel towards Eretz Yisrael, and we count the Eden. Every Shevet gets a degel and gets a Mokum Mesuyim, and the Nesiim are makriv of their Karbonis, the Chanukas HaMishkan, and Aaron lights the menorah, and the Leviim are chosen in place of the Bechorim, and Moshe makes the Chatzoytzreis Kesef, L'mikro Ha'eda, U'lemasa Esa Machanois. Everything is ready to start moving, and actually on the 20th day of the year, we begin to move. And Moshe Rabbeinu announces that Noisim, he says to Yisrael, Noisim anachnu el hamokim asher omar Hashem oisoi etein lochem. But then immediately begin the problems. Vayihi b'nesoya ha'oron. What is Moshe afraid of? Vayomer Moshe kuma Hashem v'yafutzu oivecha v'yonusu misanecha mipanecha. He's being mispalel that we shouldn't be hurt by the Zion Amamin that are in Eretz Yisrael by the Lamed Aleph Malachim, but we find out very fast that they are not the problem. The problem is from within. Vayihi ha'om kimis'oinenim ra ba'oznei Hashem v'asafsuf asher bekirbo yisavu tava. It begins with the Erev Rav, but it doesn't take long until vayoshuvu vayivku gam b'nei Yisrael vayoimru mi yachilenu basar. So it's not about the oivecha. It's not about the Misanecha. It starts to fall apart from within. And from here until the end of the Chumash, we have the Misanim, the Meraglim, Korach V'Adosai, the Mei Meriva, and so on. So the journey that was going to take 3 days, as Rashi says, ends up taking another 39 years. So it's really a turning point. I mean, Ad Kidei Kach that in the Gemara, there's a Shita, in the Masechta Shabbos, that there are 3 svarim in Chumash Bamidbar. Chotzva, Amudel, Shiva. There are 7 parts of the Torah, and Chumash Bamidbar until Vayi ben Esoya is one sefer, Vayi ben Esoya is another sefer, and whatever happens from there until the end of the Chumash is another sefer. It's so different. In any case, in each one of these maisim, we find Moshe Rabbeinu's response. It's interesting that his response is not always the same, but that's a discussion for another day. But by the Messiah, I mean, they're asking for basar. He's so disappointed that he feels he can no longer lead. He says, Lama harei oisa la'am hazeh. Lama harei oisa la'am hazeh. And no, he says, what does he say? He says, Lama hareyoisa la'avdecha, v'lama lo matzotzi chen beinecha, losum esmasa kol ha'am hazeh olai. He's saying to the Rebbeinu Shalom, he can't do it. He'anoichi harisi es kol ha'am hazeh, im anoichi yeliditihu, kisoymar elai, etc. Me'ayin li basar, lo yuchal avadi lo seis es kol ha'am hazeh, ki kavedu mimenu, v'im kocha ha'toisa li hargeini nahoroi, by the Meraglim, it's a slightly different response. By the Ma'asekorach, Vayichar l'Moshe Ma'od, Vayomer el Hashem al Teifen el Menchosam. But in the end of Parshas Behaloscha, there's one more short story, which is V'tedaber Miriam va'Aharon b'Moshe al Oidos ha'isha hakushis asher lokach. V'goymen. Vayoimru, harak ach b'Moshe diber Hashem. Halo yigam bonu diber. Vayishma Hashem. Vayish Moshe onav moed mikol adam asher al pnei adam. And the Torah continues to tell us the Rebbeinu Shalom's response, the oynish that Miriam received But there's absolutely no response mitzad Moshe Rabbeinu. Actually, it even sounds as if he didn't hear anything. Vayishma Hashem. So what did Miriam and Aharon say about Moshe? It says, Al oidoi sa isha hakushis asher lokach. It's not clear what that means. Rashi learns, ha'isha hakushis, is that she's a isha yifas toyar, on the inside, on the outside, no b'maaseh. And the criticism on Moshe was that achshav girsha. In other words, even though the pasuk is talking about ha'isha hakushis asher lokach, it's not about the lokach. They're complaining about the fact that he's separated from his wife. And the fact that they're describing her as an isha kushis is coming to strengthen their criticism. In other words, she's such a special woman, and nevertheless, he's separated from her. She's not the kind of wife that should interfere with his nevuah. Why did he abandon her? And what they're saying, Harak ach b'Moshe diber Hashem, haloi gam bonu diber, means that in spite of the fact that we're also prophets, we weren't told to separate from our spouses. So how did Moshe Rabbeinu respond? There's no response at all. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu responds. Now, did Moshe not hear what they said? The Ramban says that in the Parshas Aksuvim, it's mashma that he wasn't there. He didn't hear it. But he does bring that in the Sifri. It says, Mefurish, Befonov Shel Moshe Dibru Boy, that it was in his presence that they criticized him. But nevertheless, he doesn't respond. And the pasuk says, Vayishma Hashem, as if Hashem heard, as if Moshe Rabbeinu didn't even hear it, just passed by him. And that's the meaning of the next pasuk, Vayish Moshe, Onov Ma'oid Mikol Adam Ashal Pnei Adam. As the Rambam says at the end of Hilchos Tumas Saras, V'hu lo hoya makpid al kol elu hadvarim. He didn't care about what they said about him. Shenemar va'ish Moshe onov ma'oid. Va'afal pikein miyad nensha b'tzaras. So the Rambam says that va'ish Moshe onov ma'oid b'kol adam ashal pnei adam is coming to say that it didn't bother him at all because he was such an onov. So we see that when it was about communal affairs, things that were relevant to the tzibur, Moshe took it to heart. Lama harei oisa lavdecha im kocha at oisa li hargeni no horoig. When his mission is in danger, he almost loses it. Yeah, he feels that he can't carry out the mission. He can't fulfill his obligation. But when we're talking over here about something that's personal, so in spite of the fact that those talking about him are not the Erev Rav and not even Klal Yisrael in general, but it's his closest people, his brother and sister with whom he's leading the Klal Yisrael, and they are criticizing his family life, which is something very personal. He not only doesn't respond, he as if doesn't even hear. And the Torah says that this is because Va'ish Moshe Onov. What does Onov mean? Rashi says Shofol v'Savlon. What does that mean? That the Onov is not focused on himself. He sees the mission. He sees the task. The Balgaiva is somebody that the self is the most important thing. I mean, that takes up the right, left, and center. I mean, it's all about me. But by Moshe Rabbeinu, it's Punkt Fakez. It's not about me at all. He sees only the mission. So he's overwhelmed when his ability to carry out his mission is threatened. But when he's being criticized on a personal level, it doesn't bother him at all because he's living for something that's greater than his own personal particular life. That's the Onov. The Onov doesn't have himself in the center. Rashi says that the criticism was about the fact that he abandoned his wife. Lefizeh, Rashi is mefarish another two things. Why does it say Vatedaber Miriam v'Aharon? Why does the Torah put Miriam before Aharon? And another question is, how does this parsha come behemshich to the previous Maisa which was Vayisharu Shnei Anoshim B'Machane, Shem Ha'echad Eldod, V'Shem Hasheni Meidod, V'Atonach Aleim Aruach, Vayisnabu B'Machane. So Rashi says, V'Tedaber Miriam v'Aaron, He Poscha B'Dibur Tchila. She started talking. She was the one that started this. Lefichach Higdima HaKosach Tchila. Uminayin hoisa yoidas Miriam shepireish Moshe min ha'isha. How did Miriam know that Moshe Rabbeinu was separated from his wife? Reb Nosson Omer, Miriam hoisa betzatzi pora b'shoshe nema Moshe eldod umeidod misnabim b'machane. And kiven sheshama tzipora Amra oy l'nishoisayim shel elu im heim niskakim l'nevuah shiyu pershim nishoisayim kederech shepirish baal mimenu. She overheard Tzipora say, that it's a Rachmanis on the wives of Eldad Umeidad because they will have to separate from their wives, like Moshe was Perish Mimeni. And from that, Miriam learned that Moshe was Perish from Tzipora. Umisham Yoda Miriam V'Gida Laharan, and that's the hemshich of this parsha to the Eldad Umeidad, and that's why the Torah is Makdim Miriam. This is all Rashi's pshat, but the pasuk actually says that they spoke al ha'isha hakushis asher lokach, and there's really no remez that he was perish mimena, and that's what they were talking about. So it's interesting that Rashi holds that in derech hapshat, even in spite of the fact that there's no remez in the pasuk, that's the way to learn it. But in the Bechor Shor al HaTorah, which is one of the Rishonim, probably a Talmud of the Rabbeinu Tam. He's quoted in Taisus and Kama V'Chama V'Koymes Reb Yosef Bechor Shor. He writes like this: Al oidos ha'isha hakushis asher lokach. He writes Lefi Apshat Shehoyu Oimrim V'chiloi Matza Moshe Isha Mibnois Yisrael Sheyikach Le'Isha. He couldn't find a nice Jewish girl. Sheholach Lokachas Lo Mibnois Hakushim Shehem Arelim V'chi B'Shvil Shah HaKadosh Baruch Hu Medaber Imoi Misgoeh. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu talks to him, he holds himself so great. The time is, why did he marry Esha Kushis? Probably it's a function of his gaiva. Haloi gambonu diber. Because Baruch spoke to us also. We marry Jewish spouses. We didn't hold ourselves so great because HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to us. Now, on the pasuk Va'ish Moshe Onav Ma'od, the Bechor Shor says, Magid L'cha HaKosim, She Moshe lo yoya bal gaiva, Elo hochi hoisa sibe umazel shelokach isha kushis. Ke Moshe koshzuv gabe Shimshon, gabe ove ve'imoi shehoyu moichichin oisoi, al sheloi hoya noisei mibnois Yisrael, uksiv, va'ove ve'imoi lo yodu ki me Hashem hi. They didn't know that this was really something that was me Hashem. And now he is. We don't know. We don't know all the secrets. So not only is the Torah saying he was an anav and it wasn't a function of his gaiva, but he displayed his anivus in this context itself. That he didn't react to the criticism. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu took, so to speak, revenge for what they did to him. So they accused him of gaiva. Not only that it's not true, but he displayed in this context that he's an honor. So according to the Bechor Shor, I mean, what Rashi said, why Miriam appears before Aharon, but the Miriam v'Aharon, because she was the one that was privy to the fact that he was Perish Me'ishtoi because she overheard Tzipora. So you can't say that because it's not about being Perish from Tzipora, it's about marrying Isha Kushis. So the Bechor Shor says, on that pasuk, L'fisha Noshim Dabroni Yoishein. V'echzika Miriam B'davar Yoisem Aharon, V'lekach Hikdima La'Aharon, V'lekach Lok Sahi Basoif. So he says that the B'tadaber Miriam B'Aharon, Miriam is before Aharon because Noshim Dabroni Yoishein. Okay. And she was also more into it. But according to the derech of the Bechor Shor, we need to explain, so what's the hemshich to the Parshas Eldod Umeidod Misnabim Ba'machane? Okay, well, not everything, we don't have to say pshat on everything, but I think maybe we can suggest as follows, because it's bechlal not clear what that means, that they figured that he didn't marry a Jewish girl because he's such a bal gaiva, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks to him. What does it have to do with gaiva? I mean, what does it have to do with gaiva that he didn't marry a Bas Yisrael? So it could be that they held that Moshe Rabbeinu was so self-confident, he feels so great, that he thinks that it doesn't matter who he marries, who will be his wife. His children will be raised in his way. He doesn't need to look for Isha Mibnois Yisrael, some tzadekis who will contribute to raising the children. Whoever it is, she will be influenced by him, and his presence in the home is enough to raise the children the way they should be raised. So that's why they saw in Moshe Rabbeinu's taking the risk in marrying Mibnois HaKushim, they saw in that a function of gaiva. If this is the pshat, so it could be that that's the hemshich, the elder Dumeidod Misnab B'machne. Because what were elder Dumeidod Misnabe B'machne? Rashi says they were misnabe that Moshe mace, v'Yoshua machnis as Yisrael Oretz. So in their nevuah, it became clear not only that Moshe Rabbeinu is not going to bring Klal Yisrael into the promised land, but it also became clear that the leadership will not go over to his son, but to Yeshua, his Masharis. So that convinced Miriam and Aharon that Moshe really did the wrong thing by choosing the Isha Kushis, because Aaron's kahuna is going to go over to his children, but Moshe's children are not going to take his place. And that's because he won't be so matzliach with the chinuch of his children. With all his greatness, he himself is not enough to carry over the Messiah. Ki Isha Kushis Lokach. And this was really a very sensitive nekudah, because that Moshe Rabbeinu really expected and hoped that his children will take over. As we see right after the Parsha of B'nai Slavchon, in Parshas Pinchas, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Yifkoid Hashem Elokei HaRuchos L'chol Bosor Ish Al Ha'eda Asher Yetzei L'fneim V'asher Yovoi L'fneim V'asher Yotziem V'asher Yevim V'loitia Adatz Hashem Katzoin Asher Ein Lohem Roya. Rashi says, Kivin Sheshama Moshe T'Omar Lo Yamokoim Tein Nachlas Slavchon Libnoisov Omar Higiasho She'et B'tzorchai Tzrochai She'yirshu Bonai Es Gdulasi. But it wasn't meant to be. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him to be Soimech Yehoshua. But not only that, in Sefer Shoftim in Kapitel Yudches, we find out that Yonasan ben Gershom ben Moshe was a priest, L'Avodah Zarah, for the Pesel Micha. So Moshe Rabbeinu Taka wasn't so matzliach, so to speak, in the chinuch of his children. It's interesting that Gershom ben Moshe is the one that told Moshe about the nevuah of Eldad Umeidod. On the pasuk Vayora Tzanar, Vayaged LeMoshe, Vayomer Eldad Umeidod Misnab B'machne. Rashi says Vayora Tzanar. Yes, Omer is a Gershom ben Moshe, and Gershom ben Moshe brought to Moshe Rabbeinu this nevuah that his children are not taking over. And Gershom ben Moshe actually had a son who did what he did. So this criticism about the Ki Isha Kushis Lokach, according to the Bechor Shor, a criticism that's coming from his brother and sister, who are the closest people to him, after the Nevuah of Eldad Umeidod, really touches on a very sensitive nerve, and it should have really shaken him up, more than all the rebellions in the Midbar. But nevertheless, he Bechlal doesn't respond, and as the Rambam says, that he was Bechlal not makbid. It's as if he didn't hear. Vayish Moshe Onav Ma'oid. So what's Anivus? Yeah. It's one of the most misunderstood Midas Toivus. What is Anivus? Moshe Rabbeinu obviously believed in every word in the Torah, and he believed that Vayish Moshe Onav Ma'oid. So obviously it doesn't mean that a lack of self-awareness, a lack of recognizing your strengths and your milas. So what is Anivus? The Ramban, in the Igeres Ramban, writes like this. He starts with Tisnaheg Ledaber Kol dvarecha benachas l'chol adam ubechol eis ubazeh tinotzel min hakas shehi mida ra umeguna ma'oiz v'chulei. Okay, then he says v'kasher tinotzel min hakas tale alibcha midas ha'anova v'tizdabek bo shehi mida toiva mikol hamidas ha'toivas. So I ask you, I mean, what in the world is the hemshech hadvarim? What does it mean that kasher tinotzel min hakas? If you won't get angry, tale al mitcha al alibcha midas ha'anova. Holding back from kas is the way to acquire the midah of anova. So first of all, we need to understand what the first statement was. He said that by talking the varecha benachas l'chol odom ubechol eis, a person saves himself from kas. How's that? I mean, I think the pshat is that, ha'odom nifal lefi pu'uloisav. A person is impressed by his expressions. A person shapes his personality by what he does. And memela, when a person doesn't express his kas, he doesn't. So the kas becomes weaker on the inside also. In other words, he's medaber benachas l'chol odom b'chol eis, means that even when you're angry, and even somebody that you're angry at, you nevertheless exercise that self-control, and you medaber benachas l'chol odom b'chol eis, b'zeh tinotzel min hakas. It'll impact you internally, and eventually you will not have the emotion of kas. First, don't act it out. If you don't act it out, it will actually get weaker. If you act the opposite of kas, you medaber benachas. So ha'adam nifal lefi pu'uloisav, and you'll become ois bal kas. And then he says, v'kasher tinotzel min hakas tala alibcha midas ha'anova. In other words, when a person acts out kas, he's exercising his ego. He's exercising his self. The less we exercise that self, so the self takes a back seat. It's no longer going to be right, left, and center. It's not what everything is about. In other words, if I'm acting out kas, so I'm putting myself in the forefront and I'm living a life where I'm in the center. Whereas if I lose the midah of kas, so I'm no longer exercising my self, and memela tale alibcha midas ha'anova, which the midas ha'anova doesn't mean that I don't know who I am. It just means that I don't measure reality by myself. I measure it in a more real way. In other words, there's a lot going on. I mean, besides for myself, and memela I become a shuffle v'savlin, not in the sense of considering myself a nothing and a nobody, but in the sense of not considering myself everything and everybody, and knowing the truth that I'm just part of a much bigger picture, of a much bigger metzius, and that's how a person becomes a shafal v'savlin, and that's Moshe Rabbeinu who is totally committed to his task, to his mission, and anything that touches on that stirs him up. But talk about him personally means nothing to him. Okay, in the beginning of Parshas Shelach, when the Meraglim are being sent, it says, Eile shmoisa anoshim asher sholach Moshe losur es ha'oretz, vayikro Moshe lohoshea binun Yehoshua. So Chazal say that the idea of renaming him Yehoshua is Ko Yoshiacha me'atzas Meraglim. It was like a prayer that he should be saved from the atzas Meraglim. But in the Targum Yonis ben Azil, it says, "V'katchomo Moshe and v'senusei." When Moshe saw Yeshua's humility, Kara Moshe loishea binun Yeshua. So what does it have to do with the fact that Yeshua was an onov? But maybe we can say, the pasuk says v'hayish Moshe onov, which means that his anivus was not a stira with him being an ish. Whereas by Yeshua, it says in Mishor Soi, Yeshua binun nar lo yomish mitoicha oil. Moshe Rabbeinu was choshish that he has that type of anivus, which undermines his judgment, and when he'll be with the other meraglim who will take the wrong position, he won't be able to stand up for himself, right? And Memela Katchome Moshe and Visanuse, he said that you should have the courage and the strength to stand up for the truth, and you shouldn't be impressed with others because of your anivus. Ha'oiz v'ha'anava l'chai ha'olamim, that in order to serve the chai ha'olamim, one needs to have not only anova, but oiz v'anova. You know, there's a fascinating thing I show that there are two letters of the Chasam Sofer that appear in the Igroi Sofer, which is something that came out over 100 years ago. Anyway, there are letters of Reb Kiva Eiger over there, two letters, and from these two letters you see the rare combination of oiz va'anova. One letter is where Reb Kiva Eiger is writing to his son-in-law, the Chasam Sofer. He writes, Shalom uvracha, l'chvoid chasni yedidi v'rav chavivi kenavshi yorav agoyin ha'mefursim neiro yor, amud ha'yemini, patish ha'chozok, moreni Reb Moshe Sofer neiro yor, im biti ha'rabonis ha'tznua moras sorol, tichye, v'chule. He says like this, Af shezemi koroiv kosafti l'chvoidom. I have communicated with you, B'chsav, not long ago, Oidia ato, now I'm writing to let you know Shekoroy Vetzli Lahoshiv B'tshuva Shlema L'Kehilas Kodesh Poizna L'Leilach Sham, that I'm about to give a positive answer to the Pozna Kehila that invited me to become the Rav. And now he writes like this: Be'emes hayoidea ta'alumois yoidea shani odati benafshi she'eineni ro'oi liyos roish l'shu'olim afkila arayis. I'm b'chlal not roi to be a roish even l'shu'olim, and for sure not for arayis. The Kissi Poi Friedland, my rabbanus over here in Friedland, Gdoilo Harbe Me'erki is much more than I'm roi to. Afki Kisei Poizna is avada. Aval ma'ese. Im Rabu alai Rabboisai v'chaverai mi Lisa, mi Berlin, and mi Ravitch, and mi Yesa Kehilas Asmuchis Lepozna, mar Ishim alai, v'oimrim l'nafshi, sha'achiyuv mutla alai leilach, l'hachza atorah l'yoshno, l'hagdil chibuv atorah. And Memela, I have to go. I can't, I have no choice. And then he says, I ask you very stark. You should be masking me in your tefillas. He writes to his son-in-law. Sheyechazik Hashem koichi lahanig tzibur hagodol hazeh ulehoir einai b'toirosoi v'yitein chini be'einei ha'om v'loi evoish ba'olam hazeh v'loi ikolem la'olam haba v'yeli bazeh mishenes kone barzel v'lismoich al koichoi demar chasni neiroyor la'azreini b'tfilosoi v'chulei. So he says, I'm relying on you. That's going to be a big chizik for me. If you'll be mitzvah for me, I hope I'll be able to carry out this job. Yeah? Now he says, even weiter. After he writes another few lines, he says, getting back to the point. You should do this. In other words, I'm not even worth asking you to be mitzvah for me, but I'm your wife's father, so do it for your wife. And be mispal that I should be able to take this rabbanus and do what needs to be done. So this is one letter of Reb Kiva Eiger that is a display of a tremendous anivus. Now there's another letter from Reb Kiva Eiger in that same sefer where it says like this. It's a letter to the Maharatz Chayes, whose son was going to take a rabbanus as a bocher in a city. And he writes to him like this: Rav Sholem u'brocha v'chule shamoya shamati v'tirgas bitni. I'm all upset and angry. Shemailas kvoite rasa hismamea bevranik yomim mispor lesoif loideis b'ha'atoras dvorim leish v'ish, that you were campaigning lekabel b'noi habochur neira yor l'rav avad. Okay, libi bara ka'esh al zeh lahanik chadoshes eila gam b'medina zu lekabel ponui v'rach b'shonim al kisei ha'ira v'chulei v'yitzmachu mil zeh kilkulim rabim. Ki mehem yilmadu shar kehilas v'yichul lehem asher yimtzo. Kasher anachnu royim eichu b'avodeseinu harab. B'frat b'noi, whom he's from the town, milidei vranik, lo yikoin be'einai davar kazeh. The Yichtov, and he writes to the Raschais, who was one of the Gdolei Ador, he wasn't the Stamish Leper. He writes to him, V'yichtov miyad levranik she'enei roitz b'kach. He's demanding that he write a letter to Vranik that he's against, he should drop his son's candidacy. Ube'emes, now he is. Ani elech keneged zeh. Ve'eseh mashe b'koichi levatl zeh. I'll do everything in the world to stop this. I prefer if I won't have to. So you see such a tremendous tkifis that when he felt that something was wrong, I mean, he put himself out with a ganze tkifis and he didn't prava anivis. Yeah, so that's the ois together with the anova. Yeah, that's v'ha'ish Moshe. Anav Moed Mikol Adam Ashel Pnei Adama, and he led us. He led the Klal Yisrael, and he was able to do it, not in spite of the fact that he was an Anav, but because he was an Anav, as we know that being that he was an Anav, all he cared about was his mission and his task, and Memela, that's the story. Okay, Rabbi Isai, I wish you all a guten Shabbos.